Time for questions and for any discussion that might ensue. So we have first with us Todd Heyman, who's the owner of Fat Sheep Farm Cabins. Co-owner. Okay. Well, I won't say any more. I'll let you, you are and what you're doing. And then we got a bunch of other folks who I think are not with us in the room yet. So please introduce yourself and tell us what you think we should know.
Okay, so I am Todd Heyman. My wife and I own Fat Sheep Farm and Cabins. It is a small family diversified farm in Heartland, Vermont, which is one town south of Woodstock. On our farm, which we bought in 2016, we milk East Frisian sheep. We make sheep's milk cheese. We also, as those sheep are drying off towards the fall, we blend with a Jersey cow dairy down the road and make a blended sheep cow blend cheese. Which I bring up because in the world of Act 250 and agriculture, as you all are probably very familiar, there's a big difference between the two wedges of cheese I brought here with me, because one of them is majority weight sheep's milk from my farm, and the other one is a blend of sheep's milk from my farm and cow's milk from down the road. And those are fundamentally different products in the eyes of the law, and I don't think they should be, but we'll leave that for later. We also grow vegetables, we grow berries, we grow grain corn. This coming week, we'll be milling our own polenta and cornmeal. And we're putting in wine grapes, cold weather wine grapes this spring. We do all that. My wife milks every single day that a sheep is lactating. I do all the crops, and we both make cheese. We have one employee who we split between the two of us and fight for her time. We also have 5 cabins on our farm. Our farm house is about 3,000 square feet. It was an old dairy farm that we bought. It hadn't been on operating dairy in about 20 years when we bought it. And now it is a dairy again, as well as all the other things I just described. We almost didn't buy that farm because there was uncertainty about whether we'd be able to open our business because of Act 250. And for several months, our real estate deal sat dead. Because we were nervous that our plan, which was to build 5 cabins, and at the time we didn't even know how many cabins, but build some cabins on the farm and rent them out to help fund the farming operation. We are not what you have seen in some parts of Vermont where someone owns a farm and they pay a bunch of people to do the work. It is my own 2 hands. I planted every single crop in the ground last season. It is my wife's hands on the sheep regularly. We would not be renting cabins, but for the fact that we want to have a farm. And there's lots of misperceptions about people who are doing these hybrid farm businesses, that it's fake farms in order to start businesses. And I haven't met a single person doing these businesses whose primary interest is not the farm. Nobody farms for fun, and nobody farms for profit, and nobody is in the food business for profit, whether you're on the restaurant side, breakfast thing, farm stay. Like, it's hard to make money in agriculture. It's hard to make money in food. That's why you don't see people building buildings for new restaurants. You got to rent because the investment is too high. I say that because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about why people get into it. I say that because I don't think people have a perception as to how self-regulating the business is. You know, if I built a 30-room hotel on my little sheep dairy and diversified farm, it would fail economically. It would be viewed as not authentic. People know what they're wanting to go to, and that isn't it. So I just give that as background. I should also share, this is my 9th season on our property. And it's my 12th season farming. I worked as a lawyer for 10 years before I was in this. I have a master's in food and agricultural law. This testimony today is my own, I should emphasize. I am a member of Rural Vermont. I'm a member of NOFA Vermont. I am on the policy committee for Farm to Plate, and I am a board member of the Vermont Lodging Association. I'm a member of the Vermont Cheese Council. So I am connected to agricultural producers, agricultural processors, and people in Vermont's tourism, hospitality, lodging, and restaurant industries intimately. And so I have a very unique perspective on these accessory businesses. I see them as incredibly untapped potential for Vermont, and it's time to open the door to let them thrive. I consistently point to Italy as an example. We make a sheep's milk cheese, which you may know is quite popular in Italy, although not so much here. But you can go to Italy and you can eat on farms, you can stay on farms, you can spend weeks and weeks there without leaving farms. And they have a higher percentage of people in their population work on farms, higher percentage of small farms exist there. It is a successful way to keep farmland open and to keep people farming. It is also, I might add, a way to brand your agriculture to outsiders. Germans go to Italy and they view the agricultural products of Italy, the oil, the cheese, etc., as worthy of a price premium. Then it gets exported to those places and people buy it. The same thing happens here on a micro scale when they come and stay with us. We have people from New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts who come and stay with us and see the sheep get milked and then walk into our barn and purchase cheese from the very sheep they just saw get milked. And then when they go home, they think of Vermont cheese as worthy of a price premium. It's very small scale. I'm not saying we're doing great work for the state of Vermont, but if in the aggregate there were more opportunities to expose people to Vermont agriculture, it would help Vermont agriculture. I would say, we're here mainly to talk about 128, H128, which would create the exemption for accessory on-farm businesses. So I should start by saying that I'm in favor of that. I personally, even with my lawyer background, spent about $20,000 dealing with the permitting process when I bought the farm. As I mentioned, I almost didn't even buy it because of the law. It is a difficult, and I don't want to cast too many aspersions on the NRB while I'm here, but it is not an easy agency to work with. I have been in court with them and prevailed, and they have initiated requests that perhaps maybe I'm not doing things correctly, and I have convinced them, I'm one of the rare few people I understand to have convinced them that actually I was right and they were wrong. So it's an ongoing presence in my life, which will not go away, sadly. But and I am also connected to the local farming community in my area. People come to me to get help and assistance with dealing with the NRB or with ideas where they're wondering whether it will trigger Act 250. People who have considered starting farm-based businesses have come to me and after experiences with Act 250 decided not to pursue something because of the experience they had, the brief experience they had in dealing with the NRB. And that is a lost opportunity. There is a, believe it or not, perhaps the most uneconomical form of dairying is sheep dairying, but there are people beginning to do sheep dairying in our area at scale. And there would be people who would like to use that cheese, to use that milk to make cheese. That is difficult, even if they have their own sheep, because the majority of the product might not necessarily come from them. You cannot run a sheep dairy without cow's milk at some point, or you are wasting your time milking the sheep. And I just give that as a very personal example of why these rules, like that rule will stay even if H128 passes, but I don't get a lot of chances to come up and talk to the people who write the laws. But I would like to put on your to-do list in the future, looking at the principally produced rule, because I believe that I understand the idea that if 50% of stuff comes from that farm, we know it's a farm, they're not faking it to try and make so much money in agriculture. You know, that's the idea behind that 50% rule, and I get the mission. But if that 50% rule was instead tied to a radius around the farm, so that you could take the cow dairy from down the road's milk, or I like to use the example as I put in my written testimony of ice cream. Mm-hmm. You've got milk and you've got syrup. And there are people in Vermont who make a maple ice cream from milk and syrup. Obviously, the majority of the weight is the milk, right? If they're right across the street from each other, the syrup guy can't open an ice cream stand, but the milk producer can. Mm-hmm. Why do we care? If they're both promoting Vermont ag and they're both real Vermont agricultural producers, why do we care? And it matters, like if you were to tell me I can't sell this blended sheep cow blend anymore, I'm going to stop buying cow's milk from down the road. Is that what we want to do? Or do we want to encourage collaboration? So I mentioned that, not that H 128 is going to do anything about it. It isn't going to do anything about it. I still am supportive of H 128. But I do, now that I'm here in front of you, I do want to make those points because I think it's important that people realize that that principally produced rule discourages collaboration between farmers. This bill encourages it, not to the extent that I would like, but I get it. This is a world of compromise. This is pragmatic. My understanding is the NRB is essentially supportive of this. And if they are, and we can get some progress, let's get it done. There's 100 different ways that you could do this. I know last year I testified on H581, or maybe the year before, where it was going to try and exempt if you only disturbed an acre of land or less. I mean, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat here. But the bottom line is each time somebody decides to sell their farmland and people build houses on it, you've lost that farmland forever. And there's a lot of debate about Act 250's effect on housing and Act 250's effect on farming. If you don't build this house this year, you can always build it next year. But if you sell that farmland and someone puts a house on it, you're not getting it back. And it's time to do something. It's time to make it easier for these businesses to make it. They keep farmland around and they keep people who know how to make the farmland productive doing it. It is a farmland preservation amendment. It is not a sacrifice to the NRB's mission. NRB seeks to preserve farmland. This bill will help preserve farmland using market forces. That's the advantage of it. If you look at the way the NRB seeks to preserve farmland, they use a mitigation tool. You know, they told me, oh, well, you're putting 5 cabins on this 1.9 acre space. Therefore, you must permanently set aside 4.5 acres in your lower field of valuable agricultural soil for farming forever. Put it in the deed, and in any transfer, it must stay in the deed. Of course, I'm already farming those 4.5 acres. I don't care. But take a project that's not farming. What they're saying is on this land where nobody's farming, set aside 3.5 acres for farming in the future. Who's going to farm those 3.5 acres? Like if you want hay fields that people use in the current use program as for second home landowners, that's a great way to set aside farmland. But if you want farmland to be preserved, you need to work with the market, not against it. Otherwise, there's no one working the farmland. It's just open land. So this is an additional tool for the NRB to achieve its mission, to preserve farmland by working with market forces, not against them. I would encourage, again, on your to-do list, because I don't get to come up here that often, that someone takes a hard look at that mitigation strategy. Like there are farms in Vermont, you look at big farms like Pete's Greens or whatever, they're making it somehow at scale here. They're not many, right? And like those are farms that have a proven ability to succeed in the market. Let's buy the development rights of farms where it's actually working, like through the Vermont Land Trust things, and use money to do that because you're working with the market. Those are farms that are surviving in a tough marketplace. Let's take away the incentive to ever sell that land because that land is obviously viable and productive and capable of surviving in the market. So again, I bring that up as something to think about on your long-term to-do list. Those are my 2 big things is like mitigation just keeps land open. It doesn't keep it farming and it doesn't keep farmers around. And principally produced discourages collaboration. But going back to H128, you know, I'm here wearing my shirt because obviously the bill allows me to sell the shirt. You should know I live in a no zoning town. So the accessory on-farm business law that was passed back in 2018 had no impact on me. You know, it says municipalities can't discriminate against accessory on-farm businesses. Well, my municipality doesn't have any rules. I can build whatever I want. So I'm only subject to state regulation. Act 128 would change that and would have changed it for me because I would have had the benefit of the exemption from Act 250. You know, I spent that 20 grand. I can honestly say, you know, what I was building did not change in one bit, not even the orientation of the lights. They were all going to point down anyway. I was going to put culverts in. I used gravel. I mean, it was, you know, I went through the process. I gave them a couple grand for their efforts, and my project looked exactly like what it was going to look like had I not gone through the Act 250 process. And so H128 bridges that gap that did not exist when I built my business, in that it affects not just municipal regulation, but also state regulation. I was here in front of the Senate Ag Committee in 2018, and I testified like, this is great. You know, we're not going to have municipalities discriminating against farmers trying to start the exact same kind of businesses other people start in town. I'm all in favor of it, but you're never going to be able to start one of these businesses without going through Act 250. And until you address how these businesses relate with Act 250, that problem will persist. And here we are 6 years later. I'm excited about H128. I'm excited the NRB seems to be okay with it because it is going to make it easier. The people who have called me saying, well, if it triggers Act 250, I'm not going to do it. Those people aren't going to have to make those phone calls anymore. That's kind of my general pitch. I'm happy to take questions, but.
Yeah. So you're already adding amendments to our bill. I love that.
No, I mean, I don't want to add any amendments. I want it to pass. You just pass it.
No. I mean, this issue about principal product, that's something that, you know, I find interesting. What else?
Well, I mean, boy, you know, Steve Collier is going to be very upset with me.
Bring it on.
I'm supposed to come here and talk to you about why it shouldn't change at all because it was a delicate compromise and just push it through and get it done because we need it. Don't mess it up and put a lot of stuff.
No, mess it up.
All right. Well, no, I mean, the like I said, that I have been, you know, it's funny. I have this background in law and I read these things and I understand how they work. And I've thought about what ambiguous statutes mean. And I've been searching for an entity to support my point of view. I'm a solo on this one. Nobody will jump in on it with me. But I honestly do not understand the principally produced. I understand it's supposed to be an authenticity test, right? If you don't have 50% of your product that you're selling right there by weight or volume from your property, then you're probably not a real farm. And I don't think it's accurate. You know, it's arbitrary. It's as long as that farm is a substantial producer of a product. And I would trust the Agency of Agriculture to figure that out. I think they know what they're looking at when they see a farm. Then let's let that farm pool with other farms within a certain mile radius. I should mention it has to be within a certain mile radius because if you say a Vermont farm, well, then you're running into constitutional problems because you're discriminating against
How
the
much
others.
of a radius are you thinking?
I mean, I leave that up to you guys. I think 25 miles opens a lot of doors. I mean, where we live, I will just say the NRB has allowed the Fable Farm Collective in Bernard. It's 3 or 4 farms. They supposedly have a cooperative group. Everyone's laughing. I don't know what the inside joke is. Your farm. There you go. Oh yeah, right.
And
Sorry.
and you have 2.
You haven't returned my emails. You know, that collective, right? To me, that is a basic tacit admission by everybody that common sense is common sense. Like, why not let 5 area farms pool together to meet the 50% thing? Why should it be a one-off by the Agency of Ag for certain people and maybe not for others? Why not make that the law? Why not make it the law that if you're within a certain area, let's encourage collaboration and more markets? Because let me tell you, I am not a traditional farmer. I don't pretend to be a traditional farmer. I know traditional farmers. I talk to them all the time. We work together. We buy from them. But, you know, they don't want to open a business that I'm opening. And I imagine most of your constituents probably don't have much sympathy for the likes of me. They care about the guys who've been milking cows for 50 years. Well, if you want to help the guys who've been milking cows for 50 years, they aren't opening these accessory businesses, but they would sell to them. But you're creating a rule with principally produced that says to those to those accessory businesses who could buy from their dairy cows, don't buy from them because you're going to go over 50% and then you're not going to be able to run your business. It makes no sense. Now, you know, Philo Ridge Farm in Charlotte just closed its restaurant. But if you looked at their menu every week, and again, this is a deal with inconsistent enforcement, that was agriculture. They bought from everybody. People who didn't have accessory businesses. It was a good thing. It's a good thing that Kiss the Cow supports Fable Farm Collective. Because Fable Farm Collective is supporting Kiss the Cow, who milks cows. Like, principally produced should be promoting local ag, not a single farm. It's not an authenticity test. And the presumption behind it is that there's some secret way to make a fortune if you're only doing 20%. Let me tell you, you can do 20% ag and you're never going to make a fortune. So that's one amendment. You want one? Sorry, Steve. That's one I would put on there. I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on how to change the mitigation strategy. I would just point out that what I see happening with mitigation is the NRB says, set this land aside. And it's a pipe dream if you think anyone's ever going to farm it. There's farms in this state that are working, that are productive, that are profitable. And what we need to do is make sure they never sell that land and become something other than a farm. And what the NRB does has absolutely nothing to do with it. So that's an issue that's big. That actually does need a legislative study before you could figure out how to do it better. H28, 128 doesn't need one. You want to throw the principally produced amendment in? I think it's brilliant. But you know, what I really want my message to be is we really need to do something soon. You know, like each year that goes by, we're losing farmland. And it's against the mission of the NRB to lose farmland. It's not what the state needs. Someday, Vermont's farmland might be more economically viable to be on. You know, as the climate and the water droughts and other land around the country becomes less workable, in 30 or 40 years, nobody knows what's going to happen here. You might wish you didn't let all those farms turn into houses. And so don't dilly-dally. Let's get H-128 passed in whatever way we have to in order to get it passed, because it will allow certain businesses to open more easily that will keep farmland around for the future when you might desperately need it. That's my message.
Other questions? John?
Just quickly, you get your cows milk from Richardson, Cobb Hill, where do you get it?
I get it from Cobb Hill. Yeah.
There you go.
It was in transit. We're safe. I said you weren't going to be happy with me.
Won't be the first time.
No, they're all nervous about me being here. You can tell them that I'm on point and that I am saying pass H-128 no matter what you have to do. I am on point. But they asked about principally produced, even, so I had to.
We generally don't concern ourselves too much about how nervous the agency gets.
Neither do I.
We're happy to hear whatever your thoughts are. And John, more?
Yeah, no, my main question was, you've been in Italy, it sounds like. How, if you're in agriculture there, is it hard to develop, or can you only sell, say, to other?
No, I mean, Italy's got a totally different scheme. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been on, there's like agriturismo, dot, whatever. I mean, you can basically book a dinner, a place to stay, then you get to those places and they have all these pamphlets. You can go to do a tour of the olive oil place. I mean, they've got it figured out. And there's absolutely no way, there's no way Vermont couldn't do the exact same thing if they eased the path forward. That, you know, I go, like, again, I have this very unique perspective because I'm in the lodging industry. You know, I see the tourism messages, you know, we want more meals and rooms tax. We want tourists to stay 3 nights, not 2. How can we get another night on the average? You know, like, how can we do this? Well, I'll tell you how you can do it. If you could be a New York City, Manhattan person who has zero connection to farm and come to Vermont and come here 7 nights in a row and stay in different parts of Vermont on different farms, doing different types of farming and eat the food from those farms while you're on them. People will come and stay 7 days. They do it in Italy. They fly across the Atlantic Ocean and they never leave a farm. And, you know, when I started my business, everybody in my town thought I was nuts. They're like, who is going to go a mile up a dirt road in a town in Vermont that nobody has ever heard of to come and see some sheep get milked and eat some vegetables and berries you grew on the property? That is what all my neighbors thought. I've been in Yankee Magazine's Farm Stay, Travel and Leisure, Food and Wine. I'm about to be in USA Today. Like, there is an endless demand for this. Literally, USA Today called me yesterday asking us for pictures. Like, Vermont doesn't realize that it is sitting on, like, if you look at the comprehensive economic development plan for Vermont, agriculture is a priority industry and tourism is a priority industry. Why not start making it easier for these businesses to exist? You're going to get that 3rd night of meals and rooms tax, you know, and I'm at the Cheese Council meetings. They're worried about having a constant milk supply. They're worried that dairy farms are disappearing. Well, I mean, gosh, people want to learn about it. There's a hunger for it. We can charge $500 to teach people how to make cheese. It's just out there, and it's an untapped potential. And for a state that wants to save its agriculture, and you got in Italy, to go back to your question, they regulate it totally different. They do it by labor hours. You just vouch that over half your time is spent farming. Like, everybody's got their own authenticity tests. I'm sure there's impure examples that people are like, that's not a real farm. But I would encourage you, as you think about these issues, be like, let go of the that's not a real farm. Because for every one of those, there's 20 that are. And even if it's not a real farm, there's still farmland being preserved in doing it, which is really what you have to do. I think of these kinds of bills. I think of what I do for a living. I don't think of myself as in the tourism. I don't think of myself as a farmer. I think of myself as working in an effort to get people to understand it's worth keeping farmland around, and it's worth keeping farmers around. We lose the people who know how to do the land, and all that land that those guys have set aside for mitigation is just going to sit empty and inactive in the future. And there's no one who knows how to do anything.
We have your written testimony. I think you sent it in earlier. It's on our website. We've got another witness who's joining us remotely. He's behind over your shoulder. Who's Steve Palmer.
Hey, good. You got the right.
This here, right?
Yeah, you guys want the cheese? I know you probably can't take it.
You probably can't take it. Maybe the agency would like it. You're right.
You can't take it either, Steve? You're not a regulator. You always tell me you're not a regulator.
Thank you, Dad.
Yeah, no, thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Cheese over there.
Yeah, cheese over there. Who wants to try the cheese? You want to try the fake cheese because it's got cow's milk majority, or you want to try the real
Careful what you say, right?
There you go. I even brought a plate tonight.
How many
We
use
also
do
don't have many witnesses who changed the law.
12. It's micro. Everything's micro. over here.
Todd, what was the law that changed because of your cabin?
That was a current use law that changed. It was one that said instead of requiring 2 acres for every residence, because they called my 5 cabin facility with 1 septic, 1 power outlet, 5 different houses, and made me pull 10 acres out of current use. I was actually farming developed land because I had to pull, I didn't have any land that wasn't being farmed, so I had to pull active farmland out of current use because I put 5 little cabins under 800 square feet each on my property. But they fixed it. It took a few years, but they fixed it. Thank you.
I don't think we can claim any credit, but.
No, we did it.
No, you did.
Yeah, not this committee, at least as it's currently. allocated.
Were you on it? Well,
It's all right.
these guys.
So let's turn our attention to Steve on the big screen. And Steve, if you want to just introduce yourself, tell us where you live, what you do.
Yeah, sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. My name's Steve Palmer. I'm the owner of Shelburne Sugar Works. We're here in obviously Shelburne, Vermont, a place where there isn't a whole lot of agriculture left. So I kind of agree with the last guest that you guys just had on a lot of things that he just said. Right, Chittenden County in particular is one of those areas. I think the only milking cow farm, there's two farms, milking cow farms, dairy farms left in the town of Shelburne. And I think Heinsberg and Charlotte are close on their heels. So it's especially in Chittenden County where there's so much demand for housing. Everything that he just talked about is exactly what we're seeing here today. And that sprawl, by the way, is moving outward into Addison County and all the other counties. So I am, just to introduce myself, I'm a 3rd generation sugar maker. I grew up here. I started sugaring when I was a little kid. My grandmother started when she was, let's see, she was in her late 20s, I believe. It was 1942. And she started during the middle of World War II when there was a sugar shortage during the war. And they would use the maple to supplement sugar. And she would basically barter with it. And I grew up as a kid. We had about 1,500 buckets here on the farm and horses, and we did everything completely manually. And that's the way everyone did things back then. Today, we're still a relatively small operation. We've got about 3,000 taps. We are about as high tech as you can go. I can run and monitor half the sugar house from my phone today. It's amazing what technology can do. I'll explain a little more about where we've been, but we were really, I think, the guinea pig in terms of Act 143. We were at a point, with the sugaring operation that it's obviously a lot of work, and we were at a point where it really wasn't making a profit. We were lucky at the end of the day if we were paying our bills. And Joy my much better half, we had two little girls, and in 2018, she got sick of commercial ice cream, if you will, and started making, we're a pure maple family, right? And started making pure maple ice creams from scratch. So we would make the bases for maple. And I told her, I said, this is the best ice cream I've ever had in my life. So she started making it a little bit more in volume, and I'd take it over to the sugar house and I'd hand it out to people. And lo and behold, people just fell in love with it. And we started making it, like in pints and selling it at the sugar house in pints. And then one day my phone rang, and this gentleman named Greg Lockhart said to me, "Hey, Steve, this is Greg Lockhart from the Department of Agriculture. Have you ever heard of a thing called the PMO?" And I'm thinking at the time, the PMO? What's the PMO? Is that like the Prime Minister's office? What the heck's the PMO? So he said, no, that's called the Processed Milk Ordinance. So that started me on this journey to become basically a licensed dairy in the state of Vermont, if you will. We spent about a year at it. Act 143 at the time had just been passed, and the accessory on-farm business law was real. It took us the better part of a year to make our way through the process between ANR and the Department of Ag. I will say that the people at the Department of Ag were absolutely fantastic. Greg and his counterpart, Steve Volk, those guys, I couldn't have got through the process without them. And still to this day are right there to support us in everything we do. So that was really helpful. We launched a little bit more commercially in 2019, invested in a commercial pasteurizer. We've kind of upgraded a few times since then. I would say we've invested well over $100,000 in equipment. We now run about 12 different flavors, all pure maple. I believe we make the only true maple-based ice cream in the world where we make the bases, instead of using cane sugar, use maple. It's been an unbelievable success. And in terms of what it's done, I mean, I think it's accomplished all of the goals that you folks set out for when this thing was passed in 2018. We took a very seasonal business and we turned it into a year-round business. We're in a unique location. We now do thousands of tours a year, thousands. Samplings, education. We're open now every weekend throughout the year. We do tons of shipping. It's quadrupled our revenue. And it isn't about the ice cream. We now sell 4 times as much of the other stuff, pure maple things, that we ever used to sell. And we now sell 100% of our products retail rather than selling the majority of them wholesale. We don't longer have that need. And like I said, I think it's been great for us. We buy our dairy directly from Monument Farms. And we also support all of the other local farms, all of the berry farms that we can support. We buy, 1,000 pounds of berries every year. Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, everything you can imagine, anything that's in season. We put a lot of it in freezers and use it throughout the year. So it's much more than anything we can buy locally, pretty much we're buying. There are certain things we can't get locally, depending on the flavor that we're using, but the predominant ingredients really are maple and dairy, and those are the predominant things that we're using. It's been a huge success all the way around. So I want to thank everybody that was involved in that, and I think this effort to hopefully expand that is a great effort. There's some loopholes in here. There were some things that probably got missed, like every bill. So I think it's important. If you guys are open to it, I'd like to at least make a couple of suggestions or things that I think are of concern to me and what I've read in the new bill.
Please feel free.
A couple of things that stood out. Just one sec. I want to say, first of all, I think there was a comment from the last guest, and they talked about the principally produced product, and I think that's a really important element to consider here. I don't, I've read this like 5 times. Principally produced is defined in the back of the language, but it's not really used throughout the document. So you read it and you say, okay, are they trying to, and if it's confusing to me, believe me, it's going to be confusing to anybody else that reads it who isn't, intimately involved in crafting this. So I think it's important to clarify that is principally produced intended to be used as a way to define whether or not it is a product that would qualify as an accessory on-farm business product. Okay, I think that's important. And realize also the way it's defined today is, at least in this current language, is 50% by volume. Let's just say somebody like myself that's making ice cream, we do certainly qualify 50% in terms of the value of the product that we use, but realize maple is 10 or 12 times the value of dairy, right? We would not qualify if your intent is to say this product doesn't qualify unless you have 50% by volume of your product produced on the farm. Okay. I think that's an important distinction. I'm not sure that that's the goal in here. I keep reading this. The terms that you guys use throughout is qualifying product. But then again, at the back, you define principally produced. And I think it's important for you folks to let everybody know and understand what that's really going to mean. I think some of the other things that stood out to me, I'm a civil engineer by trade. I have my own civil engineering business. I work with municipalities every day. I think this is a really important bill in my opinion. I think particularly the parts about Act 250 are super important to all of us. I think you're going to get hung up. This is just my opinion on, the events and weddings. My opinion on that is, and it's just my opinion, is that that's probably not as critical to the ag community as a lot of the other things in this bill, to be honest. And I think that's going to get the most pushback. So I think you might want to consider, I think VLCT and some of the other folks are going to come out hard against this principally because of that. The education recreation part of this is great. Social events, I love all that stuff. I think you also need to deal with farm stands directly in the language. It's really needed. The farm stands are a critical piece of this. I think there's a couple of considerations there. Obviously, safety and parking and that kind of stuff. There's some easy ways to handle that, I think, without going through zoning, which always creates some other issues. You could simply reference, some of the AOT standards, for instance, for site distance, and make sure they have adequate off-street parking as a suggestion. I think one of the other things that really struck me is there's no definition in here who's going to make the decision on whether or not your products are qualify as an accessory on-farm business product, right? I think that's important. And for those that probably weren't involved in the original crafting of this or may not have the history of it, a lot of this came about because the zoning administrators were coming after agricultural businesses for selling direct to the public. And they started saying, well, that's no longer an agricultural practice. That's you're now a commercial entity because you're selling your products to the public. And that's where a lot of this discussion started originally. So I'm not sure. My personal opinion, being in the ag community, is that these should be defined by the Department of Ag. I think those are the people that understand agriculture a lot more than the zoning folks do. But I think it's important that you define that somewhere in here and make sure that people are clear who's going to be making those decisions. And I think one of the faults in the original bill was, defining some of that by the things that were immeasurable or not easily defined. When you start to talk about whether or not 50% of your revenue, for instance, is coming from your principally produced products, there isn't a farmer in the world that's going to turn over his records to a zoning administrator and tell them how much money they're making or not. It's just not going to happen. And at that point, by the way, too, all those records are public record. So I just think you got to think a little about how that gets done. And I'm not offering a suggestion there, but I do think the Department of Ag is probably in the best place to make the decisions about what products might or might not be considered accessory on-farm business products. Questions?
Let's see. Steve, tell us again when you started, when your wife started making ice cream samples and how long ago that was.
She started in 2018, and we got our first milk handler's license. Don't quote me on this. I think it was 2019. It might have been 2020.
Can you just say then, since then, what your experience has been with the need to get permits of one sort or another?
We haven't had any issues in terms of permits since we were licensed, but like I said, I think it would depend if the intent is to change the definition of qualifying products, and I'm not sure that that is. I keep reading this and I'm not sure, and I would encourage all of you to read it. Like I said, the language used throughout is qualifying product, but at the end you define principally produced, and it's just not clear to me how that's intended to be used, but I think it's important to clarify that. In any case, we haven't, I'm just trying to explain it's been a huge success for us. I think this has done everything you folks have wanted it to do in terms of a bill. We've now got plenty of revenue to be able to keep the land, in active agricultural use, not develop it. We are right in the middle. We've got 151 acres here that's right in the middle of the most sought after land in Chittenden County for development. And we've been able to, and my hope is that we will be able to continue to for another generation or two at least, right? Keep that in working lands. So that's our goal. That's our family's goal, not to develop the land. But if agriculture can't survive here, that's not going to happen. I mean, there is no other choice. You're not going to pay the kind of taxes on the land. You'd go broke trying to keep the land open if you couldn't use it for agriculture and it wasn't viable. So,
Representative O'Brien, do you have a question?
Yeah, Steve, I just wondered, with your success, have you had to expand, whether it's building new buildings or parking lots or lighting, all that kind of stuff? And because you're agricultural, you didn't have to go through Act 250?
correct. Or zoning, other than to show them that, there's current setbacks. And yes, to answer your question, we're getting ready to do another expansion. So we need to expand our parking lot. We're gonna get overwhelmed in the month of March and April. There's, we're dealing with 1,000 people a day. So, and we're not set up for that right now. And it's ridiculous, which it's great. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we work with the Chamber of Commerce and Hello Burlington and everybody else throughout the rest of the year. They're bringing in tourists from all over the world to come in and spend. I just had 100 folks here from Northeastern University. Had among them was the Dean of Students for Northeastern last weekend. These people had a ball. They went all around to different places. They spent 3 days in Vermont, touring a whole bunch of different places. I was last on the list, and I asked them at the end of the tour. They spent about 3 hours with us. And I said, what was your best part of your entire trip here? And they said, spending 3 hours with you, this was amazing. We'd never done anything like this before, ever. So we had them outside. We had them all go tap a tree, which was great for us. There's 100 less trees we had to tap. Everybody get a chance to try 15 different things made from maple. They all had sugar on snow. I mean, it's things that people will take with them. We'll get a bunch of return customers out of that from here to the end of time. I have all of these people asking me normally when they're here, what else can we do? I'm sending them all the breweries. I'm sending them to all the different hotels that are around, places to eat. I mean, a lot of this I attribute to Act 143, to the bill that was passed. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to do this kind of stuff without being able to generate the revenue and turning this into a full-time business. And it's been amazing. And I hope you guys recognize the success of this and the importance of it. I think the other folks who are trying to do maybe not similar things, but offshoots of, their farm, if they can't find, in most cases, some other way to make a living other than standard dairy, these farms are not going to exist. And you see it every day. We're losing a farm or 2 or 3 every week. I mean, it's amazing. And people have got to be creative. And the things that allow them to be creative are these types of laws. And I think it's really important that you define those things as agriculture. Nobody is going to go through Act 250, right? To open a small, most of these are small, starting in their kitchen types of businesses, right? They are not going to go get an Act 250 permit to be able to do that. And by the way, once you're in Act 250, you're in Act 250 forever. There is no end to Act 250, even if you stop doing whatever it is you're doing. So, we have to make it easy on them. We have to make it there. You can't throw so many hurdles and regulations in front of them that they can't succeed, right? So I thought it was important you guys hear a success story. I think it's important. I'm not complaining about anything at all. I think it's been great. I do think there's some things you could do to expand it. I just think it's also important to realize there's a whole bunch of different folks going to be looking at these regulations, right? The zoning folks will be looking at them. Obviously, the agricultural community, and if there's things in here that aren't clear to me or to you, they aren't going to be clear to other people as well. So
It's a good reminder. And I will just say to sort of the earlier point you were making also that the bill changes language of statute. The bill is not intended to be a public document that would be shared with other folks in your situation. Once the language that's in the bill
right.
ultimately passes, if to the extent that it does, or other language that we might put in, the entire statute would then be updated, and the agency, I imagine, would be providing guidance on how to interpret things. Hopefully the board as well. I did want to ask though, where you're located in Shelburne in relation to Route 7 or another major road.
Yep. So we're about 4 miles from Route 7. We're literally right in the corner of Shelburne, Shaw, and Heinsberg. The farm consists of land in all 3 towns contiguously. So I happen to live in 62 feet into the town of Heinsberg. Most of the land's in Charlotte, and the sugar house itself is in Shelburne, all contiguous.
An added challenge. Another question, Representative O'Brien.
Steve, I wondered, what's the accessory on-farm business part of your operation? Because it seems like we talked about accessory and subordinate to with this bill too, and it seems like I can see the success of your sort of the retail maple side overwhelming, the sort of more agricultural part of your sugaring operation.
Yeah, not necessarily from a sales standpoint, but it's certainly from a marketability standpoint. The ice cream itself has allowed us to bring people here year round. I mean, if you're open in the summer, and we did this prior to having ice cream available, you'd get maybe a dozen customers a day that would come in. Now, you're hundreds and hundreds a day when the weather's nice in the summer. And almost everybody just doesn't come in and have an ice cream, right? They're buying something else while they're there. And it's amazing. A lot of people want to come in they're here from, you name it, all over the United States and all over the world in a lot of cases. And they're here all different months of the year. They're not just here in March and early April when we're sugaring, right? They're here throughout the year. Most people want to come here in June and July and August when the weather's nice. It gives us an opportunity to be open, to have products for them, to be able to give tours, to educate people on how we do things. And I think and to be able, by the way, to send them to all of these other locations and provide other things for them to do. And, we have all sorts of brochures that we give to people and suggestions for places to stay and Airbnbs and hotels and restaurants and everything else around. So I think it's a boom for everybody. And it's a boom for the other agricultural entities that are involved in this too. I mean, Monument Farms, they sell us a ton of products. All of the berry farms make out from all the things that we're buying from them. And we have some berry farms, for instance, that want to carry, we do specific flavors for them at certain times. If it's blueberry season, and one of our blueberry farms wants us to do maple blueberry ice cream for them, right? So they can have it in their freezer, and they sell a couple of 100 pints of maple blueberry ice cream while the season's, in full swing. So I mean, I look at it as a boom to the entire, say, 25-mile radius here, or maybe a little more than that. Monument Farms is probably 30 or 35 miles away, but I think it's been great for everything. And I think it's accomplished everything you folks hope that it would. And I'm hopeful that a lot of other folks will be able to use this in the future a lot of people don't even know about it, to be honest with you. Agricultural entities don't even understand it. So it takes some education, but, I think this is hugely critical in this whole goal of ensuring that we have viable agriculture here.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, thank you. I've been to your place. It's right on the line where the Eric Morris,
Yep,
the Sugar Bush Polo Club's located.
yep, right across the street from my house. Yep.
I'm aware of it, but you have a great product, and do you produce 100% of the maple syrup that you use for your ice cream?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But the
Yep.
only thing that you might not produce if someone has blueberries or some other.
Yeah. Dairy, obviously, we're not a dairy producer. We've got plenty to do just with the sugaring side of the business. So
That's very impressive.
thank you.
Delicious.
We have quite a following now. It's amazing how much the ice cream has done for that. It's not our principal seller in terms of revenue, but it has added, like I said, we do 4 times the revenue we used to do, just in my opinion, because of that.
All right, well, I don't see any other questions. So Steve, thank you for your testimony this afternoon.
Thank
Very
you.
helpful.
Thanks for having me. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. We've got